Nestled in a valley, far from the roar of the freeway and the glare of big city lights, lies the quaint town of Fluffington. It's the kind of place where time seems to drift by like a feather on a lazy breeze. The pace of life is slow, gossip travels faster than the old pickup truck that sputters down Main Street, and the residents, they all know each other by name. Fluffington is known for its charming cottages, each one seemingly plucked from the pages of a storybook. Window boxes overflow with geraniums, gardens burst with sunflowers. Even the air smells faintly of lavender and freshly baked cookies. But beneath this idyllic facade lies a secret, a tradition so utterly bizarre, so delightfully absurd that it could only exist in a town like Fluffington. The annual Pillow Fight Festival, you see, is not your average run-of-the-mill pillow fight. Oh no, this is serious business in Fluffington. It's more than just a festival. It's a rite of passage, a chance to settle old scores, and for some, a shot at fleeting glory. Weeks before the big day, the town buzzes with activity. Grandmas dust off their most formidable feather-stuffed weapons. Dads construct makeshift pillow forts in their backyards, much to the delight of their squealing offspring. Teenagers, fueled by hormones and a desire to impress, practice their swing, aiming for that perfect pillow-to-face contact. The scent of baking fills the air as families gather to create their signature pillow snacks, miniature pastries shaped like pillows naturally. These treats are not just for sustenance, they're a symbol of community, a reminder that even in the heat of battle, life in Fluffington is still pretty darn sweet. The day before the festival, the entire town gathers in the town square to help construct the Pillow Fight Arena. It's a sight to behold, this sea of overalls and sundresses, working together with laughter and good-natured ribbing. Children race around, their voices echoing with excitement, while teenagers sneak shy glances at each other over stacks of pillows. And then, just as the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the square, the arena is complete. A giant circle, marked out by hay bales and strung with twinkling lights, stands ready for the chaos that awaits. The air crackles with anticipation. Tomorrow, the pillows will fly. At the heart of this annual feather-flying frenzy are two unlikely rivals, Mayor Malcolm Fluffykins III, a man who takes his title far too seriously, and Granny Gertrude, a woman who takes absolutely nothing seriously, except, of course, the pillow fight.
Mayor Fluffykins, a portly gentleman with a penchant for ascots and pronouncements, views the festival as an opportunity to showcase Fluffington's, let's call it, unique charm. He sees himself as the conductor of this symphony of silliness, the dignified leader guiding his people in a display of harmless fun.
Granny Gertrude, on the other hand, sees the festival as her own personal Thunderdome. A tiny woman with a twinkle in her eye and a surprising amount of upper body strength, she approaches the pillow fight with the ferocity of a warrior queen defending her realm. Woe betide the unsuspecting soul who crosses her path once the feathers start flying.
Their rivalry is the stuff of Fluffington legend. It's a clash of styles, a battle of wills, a spectacle that has the entire town holding its breath, then erupting in laughter year after year. Some whisper that their feud began decades ago, a dispute over a particularly fluffy blueberry scone at the annual bake-off. Others claim it stems from a disagreement over the placement of the petunia bed in the town square. The truth, like the winner of the pillow fight, remains shrouded in a cloud of feathers and speculation. But one thing is certain. When these two titans of fluff collide, it's guaranteed to be a showdown for the ages. The morning of the festival dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that smelled like hope and freshly cut grass. The sun, a giant golden orb, peeked over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the town of Fluffington. It was as if the very universe was holding its breath, bracing itself for the glorious feather-filled chaos that was about to unfold. The streets, usually quiet enough to hear a pin drop, thrummed with a nervous energy. The air buzzed with the sounds of children laughing, dogs barking excitedly, and oddly enough, the rhythmic thud of pillows being tested for optimal fluffiness. The aroma of coffee and maple syrup wafted from kitchen windows, mingling with the scent of fresh hay from the makeshift arena. The townsfolk, dressed in their finest pillow fighting attire, think pajamas, bathrobes, and the occasional Viking helmet, emerged from their homes, their faces alight with anticipation. Grandmas compared battle strategies over steaming mugs of tea. Dads chased errant toddlers through the streets, their laughter echoing off the brightly painted houses. Even the town's resident cat, a grumpy tabby named Sir Reginald Fluffington I, no relation to the mayor, seemed to sense the impending mayhem. He sat perched on the windowsill of the general store, his tail twitching nervously, as if contemplating making a break for the safety of the nearby woods.
As the clock ticked closer to noon, the official start time of the pillow fight, the crowd began to gather in the town square.
Friends, Fluffingtonians, it is with great pride and a heart full of, well, fluff, that I welcome you to this, the most glorious, the most chaotic, the most feathery day of the year.
For generations we have gathered on this hallowed ground to engage in this our most cherished tradition, to test our mettle, to prove our fluff-flinging prowess, to have a jolly good time.
Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the mayor reached the end of his speech.
And so, let the games begin.
He threw his hands up in the air, and a hush fell over the crowd. Then, with a deafening roar, the silence was shattered. Pillows flew through the air like fluffy missiles, propelled by years of pent-up frustration, sibling rivalry, and the sheer joy of whacking your neighbor with a sack of feathers. The air, thick with the sweet scent of hay and the faintest hint of lavender, transformed into a swirling vortex of feathers and fury. Pillows, once symbols of comfort and slumber, became weapons of mass fluff destruction. Each thwack, each satisfying thud as down connected with skull, or backside, or unsuspecting bystander, was met with a roar of laughter or a shriek of mock outrage. Children, their faces flushed with exertion and glee, darted through the melee like tiny giggling projectiles. Their laughter, high and pure, pierced through the cacophony of thumps and triumphant yells. They wielded their pillows with reckless abandon, their small stature no match for their boundless energy and enthusiasm. Teenagers, their initial bravado giving way to giddy hysteria, formed alliances and launched coordinated attacks, only to dissolve into fits of laughter when their carefully laid plans went hilariously awry. Feathers clung to their hair, their clothes, their eyelashes, transforming them into bizarre avian creatures much to their own amusement. Even the dogs, caught up in the infectious energy of the day, joined the fray. They barked and weaved through the crowd, snapping at errant feathers and occasionally toppling over an unsuspecting participant with a joyful leap. The air thrummed with a chaotic energy, a sense of joyous abandon that only a town like Fluffington, with its peculiar traditions and love of all things fluffy, could generate.
Yes, quite spirited, though perhaps a tad excessive on the feather front. Must remember to suggest biodegradable alternatives next year, for the sake of the environment, of course.
Mayor Fluffykins, his initial enthusiasm somewhat dampened by the sheer ferocity of the pillow fight, had retreated to the relative safety of the stage. He stood there, adjusting his monocle and brushing stray feathers from his velvet suit, a look of detached amusement on his face. He fancied himself above the fray, a dignified observer of this annual display of Fluffingtonian folly. He surveyed the scene with a critical eye, making mental notes for his post-festival report to the town council. Just as he was congratulating himself on his own level-headedness, disaster struck. A mischievous gust of wind, as if summoned by the gods of chaos themselves, swept across the town square. It whipped through the arena, sending a flurry of feathers skyward and momentarily halting the pillow fight as the crowd gasped in unison. The wind caught the mayor's prized possession, his ceremonial feather boa, a fluffy monstrosity of ostrich plumes and satin ribbons, and ripped it from his shoulders. The boa, as if imbued with a life of its own, soared through the air like a majestic feathery bird, trailing behind it a faint scent of mothballs and the mayor's outrage. S5. "My boa!" shrieked the mayor, his voice cracking with a mixture of horror and indignation. "Someone catch my boa!" His cry, usually met with respectful silence, was swallowed up by the sudden resurgence of the pillow fight, now fueled by the sight of the mayor's predicament. The sight of the airborne boa, a symbol of mayoral authority now transformed into a plaything of the wind, proved too much for the already excitable crowd. What began as a valiant, if somewhat misguided, attempt to retrieve the errant garment quickly descended into utter pandemonium. Pillows aimed at the boa, but finding their mark on the heads, backs, and stomachs of unsuspecting bystanders, flew through the air with renewed vigor. The crowd, their attention now laser-focused on the elusive feather boa, surged back and forth across the square, a chaotic ballet of flailing limbs and misplaced swings. The mayor, his face now a delightful shade of puce, found himself the unwitting target of this feathery assault. He ducked and weaved, his dignity rapidly abandoning him as he attempted to dodge the incoming projectiles. Each near miss was met with a chorus of delighted shrieks from the crowd, who seemed to find immense amusement in the mayor's misfortune. "Mind the monocle!" he cried, his voice barely audible above the din. "This is chaos, utter feathery chaos!"
Granny Gertrude, however, remained unfazed by the chaos swirling around her. She surveyed the scene with a seasoned eye, her mind calculating angles and trajectories with the precision of a military strategist. The wind, she realized, was her ally.
With a speed that belied her age, she scrambled onto a nearby stack of hay bales, her trusty pillow clutched firmly in her hand. She waited for the perfect moment, her eyes never leaving the airborne boa as it danced on the wind like a taunting feather duster. And then, with a triumphant yell that would have made a Viking warrior proud, she struck.
She extended her pillow, her aim true, and intercepted the boa mid-flight. The crowd, their attention momentarily diverted from the mayor's plight, gasped in unison as Granny Gertrude, perched atop her hay bale throne, held aloft the captured garment. A hush fell over the square. The pillow fight, as if robbed of its momentum by this unexpected turn of events, slowly ground to a halt. The only sound was the gentle thud of discarded pillows hitting the ground, and the faint wheezing of the mayor, who had finally managed to extricate himself from the bottom of a particularly enthusiastic pile of children. Granny Gertrude, her face beaming with a mixture of mischief and triumph, surveyed her domain. The boa, still clutched firmly in her hand, seemed to pulsate with a life of its own, its feathers trembling slightly in the afternoon breeze.
The crowd, their earlier desire to pelt each other with pillows forgotten, surged forward, surrounding Granny Gertrude and lifting her onto their shoulders. They chanted her name, their voices echoing through the square, their faces alight with admiration and amusement. Granny Gertrude, perched precariously on her makeshift throne, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She draped the feather boa around her head like a crown, its ostrich plumes swaying gently in the breeze. She had done it again. She had conquered not only her rivals in the pillow fight, but also, it seemed, the very forces of nature themselves. The mayor, his face still bearing the imprint of 1,000 feather thwacks, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of resignation and grudging respect. He adjusted his monocle, straightened his ascot, and allowed himself a small, private sigh. There was simply no competing with Granny Gertrude. Not today, not ever. She was, for this day at least, the undisputed Queen of Fluffington. A young boy, his face still streaked with dirt and a single feather clinging to his cheek, pointed at Granny Gertrude. His proclamation was met with a smattering of applause, which quickly grew into a rousing cheer. The silence stretched on, broken only by the chirping of startled birds in the nearby trees and the distant barking of a dog. Then, a single voice, high and clear, pierced the quiet. "The Queen! The Queen!" The crowd roared with laughter, their cheers echoing through the square and beyond, reaching the furthest corners of Fluffington. The sight of their usually dignified mayor, now disheveled and feather-bombed, paled in comparison to the sheer spectacle of Granny Gertrude, perched atop the human pyramid, clutching that ridiculous boa like a scepter.
The world, for that brief, glorious moment, tilted on its axis. The usual order of things, the mayor giving speeches, Granny Gertrude heckling from the sidelines, had been gloriously upended. The underdog, the feisty octogenarian with a twinkle in her eye and a pillow for every occasion, had triumphed. And the crowd, hungry for a hero, for a break from the mundane, for a reason to laugh until their sides ached, embraced her with open arms. Even Sir Reginald Fluffington I, the town's resident curmudgeon, seemed impressed. He emerged from the general store where he'd been hiding beneath a shelf of canned peaches and let out a meow of grudging approval. Or perhaps he was just sneezing from all the feathers in the air. It was hard to tell with Sir Reginald.
The mayor, his face now returning to its normal shade of pale pink, cleared his throat and attempted to regain a semblance of control. He raised his hands, his movements hesitant, as if unsure whether he'd be met with a volley of pillows or, God forbid, another well-aimed prune.
My dear Fluffingtonians, this year's festival has been eventful. He attempted a smile, but it came out more like a grimace. Now let's not get ahead of ourselves, the mayor continued, his voice regaining a bit of its usual bluster. While I applaud Granny Gertrude's athleticism, it's time we return to the true spirit of this occasion. The annual Pillow Fight Festival is not about winning or losing, it's about community and camaraderie.
Granny Gertrude had other plans. She had waited 82 years for this moment and wasn't about to let the mayor ruin it. With a mischievous glint, she whispered something to the nearest teenager. The teenager, his face flushed with excitement, marched forward, leading Granny Gertrude on a victory lap. The crowd went wild. They cheered and clapped, showering her with stray feathers. Children raced alongside, their laughter ringing through the air. Granny Gertrude, her crown of feathers bobbing, beamed at her adoring public. She had never felt so alive, so powerful, so feathery.
The mayor, his attempt to restore order thwarted, watched in stunned silence as Granny Gertrude completed her lap. He had a feeling this was a day that would go down in Fluffington history.
Well done, Gertrude, he said, managing a smile. You've certainly given us all something to talk about.
Don't think this means I've gone soft, Fluffykins, she said, her voice strong. I'll be back next year to defend my title. Be ready. She winked, turned on her heel and marched off towards the snack table. Section 5. The Legend of the Boa. The rest, as they say, is history. Granny Gertrude's victory became the stuff of local legend. Children grew up hearing tales of her daring feat and uncanny aim. The feather boa, once a symbol of mayoral authority, became a sacred relic. As for Mayor Fluffykins, he never quite lived down the embarrassment. The incident became a source of much good-natured ribbing at town council meetings. But even he couldn't help but smile at the memory of that chaotic, feather-filled day. It was a reminder that even in a predictable town like Fluffington, the unexpected could always occur. And sometimes, the unexpected was exactly what the town needed.
The townsfolk, still giddy from the spectacle, herded Granny Gertrude towards the stage. The mayor, brushing a final feather from his lapel, cleared his throat nervously. This wasn't in the official programme. He prided himself on running a tight ship where chaos was kept at bay. Yet here he was, about to crown an octogenarian pillow warrior queen. And he had to admit a tiny part of him was kind of enjoying the ride. Citizens of Fluffington, he boomed, attempting to regain a semblance of mayoral dignity. It appears we have a new champion in our midst.
The crowd erupted once more. Granny Gertrude, her eyes twinkling, held up her hand for silence. The crowd, surprisingly, obeyed. Perhaps it was the feather boa, now draped regally around her shoulders. Or maybe it was the glint of steel in her eye. All right, settle down, you lot, Granny Gertrude chuckled. No need to make a fuss, it's just a silly little pillow fight after all.
The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and congratulatory hugs. Even the mayor, his earlier humiliation fading, found himself caught up in the festive atmosphere. He could even be seen tapping his foot to the music as the Fluffington fiddlers played. Tables were set up in the town square, groaning under the weight of potluck dishes. There were casseroles with names like Featherlight Fiesta and Downy Delight. Children, their faces smeared with frosting and feathers, raced through the square. Teenagers gathered in giggling groups, stealing shy glances at each other. And at the center of it all, holding court like the queen she was, sat Granny Gertrude. She'd traded the mayor's feather boa for a crown of dandelions. She looked every inch the conquering hero, even if her throne was just a stack of hay bales.
I must say, Gertrude, you wear it well, though I imagine it clashes terribly with your gardening attire.
Don't you worry, Fluffykins, I've got just the place for it.
The mayor returned the pilfered garment to its rightful owner. The next morning, as the sun rose over Fluffington, the residents awoke to a rather unusual sight. There, hanging from the porch swing of Granny Gertrude's cottage, was the mayor's feather boa. The sight of that boa became a source of much amusement and whispered commentary. Some saw it as a sign of Granny Gertrude's triumph. Others viewed it as a symbol of a subtle shift in the balance of power. Life eventually returned to its usual rhythm in Fluffington. The feathers settled, the laughter faded, and the residents went back to their routines. The great pillow fight fiasco of Fluffington, however, lived on in the town's collective memory. It became the stuff of legend, a tale recounted with much embellishment and laughter every year. Children grew up hearing the story, their eyes wide with wonder. The festival itself continued, but it was never quite the same. There was a new energy in the air, a sense of anything can happen excitement. The mayor, his ego somewhat deflated, took to wearing a rather fetching hat to future festivals. And Granny Gertrude? Well, she became something of a local celebrity. Children stopped by her house after school for cookies and stories. Teenagers sought her advice on matters of the heart and pillow fighting techniques. And the mayor, every now and then, would drop by for a cup of tea and a slice of her famous rhubarb pie. The great pillow fight fiasco of Fluffington had done more than just crown a new champion. It had reminded the residents of something they'd almost forgotten. It had reminded them that sometimes the most unexpected events are the ones that make life worth living. Who knew that a town obsessed with pillows could teach us so much about life? The great pillow fight fiasco teaches us that life, like a well-aimed pillow, can knock you off your feet. It reminds us that those we underestimate often have the most surprising strength and resilience. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that sometimes letting go of our need for control can lead to the most unexpected and delightful experiences. After all, who wants to live in a world where a feather boa can't become a symbol of rebellion? Fluffington, with its annual embrace of the absurd, reminds us that it's okay to be a little different. In a world that often feels increasingly divided, Fluffington stands as a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring power of community and laughter. The residents of Fluffington remind us that even in a world that can feel isolating, there's still a place for connection and shared experiences. Years from now, the legend of the Great Pillow Fight Fiasco will continue to be passed down through the generations. Children yet to be born will gather around their grandparents' knees, listening to tales of the day Granny Gertrude ruled the pillow fight arena. The story will evolve with each telling. Details will be embellished. Characters will grow larger than life. But the heart of the story, the message of resilience and community, will remain. And so, the legacy of the Great Pillow Fight Fiasco will live on in the spirit of Fluffington. As we leave behind the quaint town of Fluffington, let us carry with us the lessons we've learned. Let us embrace the unexpected, the moments of chaos and absurdity that make life interesting. Let us remember that sometimes the best laid plans are the ones that go gloriously awry. And who knows? Maybe the next time you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, you'll be inspired to start a pillow fight of your own. You might be surprised at the joy that can be found in a little bit of harmless, feathery mayhem. So until next year, Fluffington, we bid you adieu. May your pillows always be fluffy, your feather boas forever fabulous, and your spirit forever indomitable. Thank you for reminding us that sometimes the best way to deal with life's little bumps and bruises is to grab a pillow and let the feathers fly. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us on this journey to the heart of Fluffington. We hope you've enjoyed this tale of feathers, friendship, and the triumph of the underdog. Remember, life's too short to take things too seriously. So go out there, embrace the absurd, and don't be afraid to let your freak flag fly. Or, in the spirit of Fluffington, let your feather boa fly.